This video contains spoilers. The big introduction to every Fatui member began with the Winter Night Lazo trailer that was released over 3 years ago. However, we've been introduced to the Fatui before this point. We saw Jean stress about diplomatic relations with the Fatui before Signora made her appearance to seal Venti's gnosis. We then met Child in Liyue and got to know him after he saves the Traveler from getting wrongfully arrested. An interesting story plays out as he seems to be aiding us at first until we realize he gave us fake sigils with the ploy to drown all of Liyue. Remember that? It's not until we get Child's story quest where we get to see a different side to him. We see him keeping up the lie of the greatest toy seller so that his little brother doesn't discover that he's part of the Fatui, let alone a harbinger. It's here that we realize they have their own internal motivations despite being harbingers pledging their loyalty to the Tsaritsa. In Inazuma, we officially meet Scaramouche. Assuming you were not around in version 1.1, then you would have met him ahead of schedule as he tried to assassinate the Traveler. We also see Signora's end after she loses a duel against the Traveler and the Raiden Shogun turns her to dust. It's after this that we would get the Winter Night Lazo trailer, officially revealing the rest of the harbingers we had yet to see. We get a little bit of dialogue from most of them as they all mourned La Signora's loss. This far into the game's lifespan, the Fatui were at the very least set up to be an antagonistic force to the Traveler's journey. Some of the harbingers at this point, like Signora and Scaramouche, were more villainous than others, but they had so far worked against the Traveler with the exception of Child's story quest. We also were introduced to the Abyss led by the Abyss Twin in version 1, setting up another antagonistic force to the game. If you take a look at how the Fatui has been written in the past, you might notice a shift. Scaramouche was clearly antagonistic towards the player, but went through a really interesting story arc to justify his change. He went from being blinded by rage for his revenge to wanting to completely delete himself from Irminsul, as if he was never created in the first place. With Nahida's help, he was able to regain the memories of his former self and now lives to do better as a scholar, with maybe a little sprinkle of revenge left for Totore. Speaking of, we can't forget that Totore's official entrance was in Sumeru, as he was the one responsible for turning Scaramouche into a god. I know I'm rehashing a lot of story events, but bear with me just a little longer. Arlecchino has mentioned in previous character lines that her loyalty to the Tsaritsa is fickle. Her part in the Fontaine story quest was unique because of this, as she prioritized that of the House of the Hearth and Fontaine as a whole over Her Majesty's orders for the Gnosis. We were able to work with Arlecchino because she was so determined to prevent the prophecy, yet in a flashback, we see her nearly taking Freena's life until she realized that something was off about her. This was the second time a Harbinger was willing to aid the Traveler, except without any sneaky caveats like Child's ploy to drown the harbor. Speaking of Child, he would have a part to play in Fontaine's story as well, giving his vision that was acting up to the Traveler to hold on to for a while. This is how we eventually meet Skirk thanks to the all-devouring whale, and the fun scene where she eats Child into the void. In Natlan, we are introduced to the captain, who ended up playing a pretty tragic role in the overall plot of the region, but unfortunately he now rests completely still. Nod Krai was not in the Tevat trailer, as it was created later in development to help tie loose lore ends together. It's revealed that the Damselette would take the spotlight, but other harbingers like Arlecchino, Sandrone, and Totore would play a part too. And Wanderer, but he's no longer part of the Fatui ranks. It was how the harbingers were written in Nod Krai that got players thinking, what happened to the Fatui? Arlecchino, who did work for us in the past, was pretty friendly all things considered. She was willing to help Columbina out and fight against Totore. Seeing as she had a connection to one of the moons that was set up back in Fontaine, I'm not too surprised by her involvement and development. The next one with Sandrone is where people began to scratch their heads. She was introduced as a jerk claiming that Nod Krai was a lawless land waiting to be ruled by someone, that being the Fatui. She was being set up as an antagonistic force that had always been watching the Traveler through Catherine. The knowledge Sandrone could have had on us that would have been completely catastrophic if she had decided to foil our plans. Instead, as the next few patches unfolded, we see her defending the Traveler with Polonia and working with the rest of the crew. Normally this development wouldn't be an issue, but it feels like our arm was suddenly tugged in the other direction. Who we thought could have possibly been a new antagonist against the Traveler turned out to be a buddy, which isn't a bad thing. It's just not what we were set up to believe with her introduction in the game. Now, this could have been intentional, or it could have been some contradictory writing, seeing as her character itself is very contradictory with her saying mean words but acting differently. It could very well be intentional writing to her character. The only Fatui harbinger that remained a hostile force are Signora and Totore, and one of them is dead. This video is being written after the 6.3 storyline, and I highly doubt that Totore is gone for good. The guy has segments, and I have a strong feeling he'll be back, especially after the quest complete glitch screen. Scaramouche was hostile, trying to kill the Traveler a few times, but his story arc arc changed him. Now he was recently seen actually saving the Traveler. Arlecchino showed hostility in her fight against the Traveler, but it ended up being a test of strength for the House of the Hearth. Her blood moon did give the Traveler quite a fright though. The captain was not hostile towards the Traveler and in fact was quite agreeable in working together to save Natlan. There was some tension between how they wanted to go about saving Natlan. He wanted to use the Gnosis, but it didn't take much convincing from Malika to go along with her plan instead. This means that Totore is the only harbinger that has remained hostile and a true antagonistic force so far. He even goes as far as to claim he's a villain, but yet gives the Traveler numerous chances to join him. Those memes of one more chance exist because he kept giving countless chances to the Traveler. But what about Columbina? I've seen a lot of conversations surrounding her character. Some players love her aloof nature. Some think that it's weird that she's a moon goddess that was in the Fatui. Some think she got rewritten entirely once the developers realized that they needed to add Nod Krai. Honestly, I don't think the rewritten part is a fair assessment. The only knowledge we had of Columbina prior to her entrance in the game was the Winter Night Lazo and some voice lines. I don't think that's enough information to say that she was intended for one purpose and was completely retconned to be something else. Core parts of her design carried over, and her singing, the one thing she did do in the trailer, remained relevant throughout the Nod Krai story. It's possible that the direction of her writing changed, sure, but we have no way of officially knowing that. All of the Fatui harbingers can fall into this category as they were strategically revealed, but in a way that didn't set their characters' writing into stone. The same goes for Natlan. As much as I personally believe Natlan was rewritten at some point, thanks to the disconnected foreshadowing versus what we actually got, we won't know for sure unless an employee deliberately tells us so. We barely get any foreshadowing for Columbina, so it's hard to say that her character was changed when we barely knew who she was. Natlan, on the other hand, got a lot more foreshadowing with the Teyvat trailer, and some characters like Neuvillette claiming it was a land of dragons, but that he likely wouldn't be welcome there. Columbina had already left the Fatui by the time we met her, and she had an arrest warrant out for her head. Her brief hostility towards us was only because she thought we were confronting her on the Batui's behalf. Instead, the developers took a different approach with Columbina. She wasn't against working with the Traveler, but she also wasn't super interested at first. She strongly believed that gods must return favors and that most relationships were transactional due to being a goddess. It's through the story that the cast shows Columbina that friendship isn't transactional, allowing her to open up. That was a lot of yapping to say that, hey, I don't think Columbina was rewritten, and no, I don't think the Fatui were set up to be the main villains of the story. I think they were set up to be antagonists, absolutely, but now that we know more, I think the developers are setting up for a greater evil, that being the heavenly principles. We still have the ongoing crisis with the Abyss Twin that has yet to be resolved, as well as the Sinners might be another force trying to impede on our progress as well. I don't think the Fatui was intended to be the end-all, be-all bad guys of the game. They're morally great characters that are multifaceted. They have ambitions of their own outside of their work for the Tsaritsa, and that's what makes them so interesting and why so many of us love them. Plus, we still have a handful of harbingers and the Tsaritsa herself to meet. The Fatui members always had their own personal motives, and we get to see a lot of them carry those out. Even Totore, who is actively working against us, is working on his experiments whether they align with the Tsaritsa's goals or not. Arlecchino gets to watch over the House of the Hearth. Sandrone gets to work on her formulas and make machines. Columbina was not forced to work a single mission and sang lots. The only harbinger I think that got slighted was Signora. I would have loved to see a cutscene at the moment of her execution detailing some of her backstory. At the very least, we would have seen her pass before she would be rendered to dust, making the moment all the more powerful. I don't think we will have a clear answer to the question if the Fatui changed until we meet the Tsaritsa and see her story unfold. In the Teyvat trailer, we get a blurb about her preparing for the war against the Divine. I want to know more about this and how the harbingers have assisted towards that goal aside from acquiring the Gnosis. I want to understand why she allowed the harbingers to pursue their own interests. I also want to meet the rest of the harbingers to see who will work with the Traveler or against them. And we can't forget the one line from the Teyvat trailer. She's the god of love, but doesn't have any love left for her people, nor do they have any for her. I want to know what that means too. And of course, if you disagree with me, that's completely fine. I encourage you to write down your thoughts and just remember to be respectful. I tried to go over key points to avoid a 30+ long minute video. Thank you so much for watching. This video was a request from a few of you, and I hope this was entertaining. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I don't go over lore too often as there's so much to remember, but I have plenty of other gacha related videos you can watch next if you like. I hope to see you in the next one.